This is the Pharmaverse podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack, engaging leaders from the pharma universe. Hello and welcome to the Pharmaverse podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack. And if you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the pharmaceutical industry, you're in the right place because we interview the brightest stars from all corners of the pharma universe. And today's guest would certainly fit that description. We're joined by Nav Singh, a McKinsey Senior Partner Emeritus. He was the managing partner at the McKinsey's Boston office for decades. And he's here to talk with us about the current landscape and the future of pharma. Nav Singh, welcome to the Pharmaverse.
Thank you, Michael. I look forward to the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Me too. You know, one of the things that struck me about your background is you have this amazing consultant experience in life sciences. But before you even got into that, you were an inventor, an entrepreneur before joining McKinsey. You have tens of patents in material science and engineering. Is that right?
That is correct. So I have a PhD in chemical engineering and I have an MBA also, but I started my professional life at GE. And out there, I had the privilege and the pleasure of working with some amazing people. And we invented around 20 odd online patents that were ultimately filed and approved. They span the verse of material science to nanotubes, to like polymers and plastics and enhanced materials and so on. That was a long, long time ago, Michael. I have not filed any since then, but it was a blast to be a G.
That is so cool. It's always interesting how people find their way to life sciences or their niche where they spend a lot of their life. And it's crazy that you were an inventor. Now, with that in mind, I want to reverse engineer what's going on with the pharma industry right now. I'm a biopharma recruiter. It seems like most companies are struggling financially. So put your engineer hat on. How did we get into this situation?
So, Michael, the first thing is we need to remember this industry played a huge role during COVID-19. That was a real example just over the last few years. What is happening with the weight loss drugs now is another big example that is having a meaningful impact on patients' lives. So this industry is all about patients and all about solving the unmet needs of patients and taking some big swings and big risk. And for that, we should be all very proud of what this industry does. They take big risk and they try to cure big things. The challenge is that to do that, they need to spend more and more on R&D. It used to be $50 or $60 billion at some point, then became 150. The recent count I've heard is $250 billion a year. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. I hope that is not the case, but it may be. And some are saying it could be $300 billion by 2030. That is a pretty staggering number. And this is in the context of how many new drugs get approved. If you look at 2024, so far this year, 38 drugs have been approved. If you look at 2023, around 55, 2022, around 38, 2021, around 50. So you look over the years, numbers have varied between 30 to 65. And yet your R&D spend is going up massively. So your rough math, if you were to just say, look, I'm going to take a look at the amount spent divided by the number of drugs approved. You and I both know that math is absolutely wrong, but just to give you a sense of it, that's around $5 billion a drug. And that is a massive issue. So there's a huge issue around how much it costs to bring a new drug to the market. Now, what does that mean? Right? So if you take a look at the segments, one needs to think about this in the context of large pharma, biotech, life sciences, tools and services. Those are the three big areas. In the context of biotech, if you are successful, you are massively successful. Sadly, most people will fail. And that's life. If you are a large pharma, hopefully you have deep enough pockets to keep on acquiring these assets over time, especially the ones that work. So when a drug gets launched, there's a lot of party time and people are very happy. But we all know that after some time, the patents expire and the drugs go off patent. And that leads to all kinds of complications down the road. So there are ups and downs. As a result, if you look at the pharmaceutical index, and if you were to just track that over time, it has not done much. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. Although the dividends are pretty good, but the index by itself is not always a reliable performer compared to the S&P 500.
Let's talk about that index for a second, if you don't mind, because you're also a business analyst. And so do you use that index to evaluate the strength of the pharma industry?
I don't, because I believe that one needs to look at each of these companies company by company. I choose to invest in the S&P 500 index, which is a broader index of the full market, or the Nasdaq 100. I do not invest in the pharmaceutical index because I know there are lots of ups and downs. But it is just a marker, right? I mean, most companies, if you look at the Nasdaq 100, if you look at the S&P 500, things keep going up. In the biopharmaceutical industry, it's critical to figure out what are you investing in and just not blindly invest in the index.
Yeah. So when you evaluate the strength of the whole pharma industry, how do you do that as a business analyst?
I choose not to, right? I think that is what there are many of the people who will have commentary on that and have expertise on that. I think it is a fool's errand to try to do this at a macro level. See, because at the micro level, if you are a biotech doing radiopharmaceuticals, you could be doing amazingly well right now. If you're into biospecifics, you could be doing very, very well. So to comment on the full industry, while I should be able to say, yes, of course I can, and I can, I'm not sure if it's that useful.
Yeah,
Now, what is interesting is the life sciences tools and services part. And that part of the industry has done phenomenally well over a long time because they are directly linked to the R&D spend and the commercial spend, and they are providing a service of that. And historically, if you look at private equity, they have invested a lot in these companies and they've done extremely well over time. The challenge now is that they are directly linked to the drugs launched and they're directly linked to what is in the pipeline. And when the R&D spend goes down, they will also hurt. And that is what is going on right now. So again, to comment on the full industry, in my mind, is not as useful. It is much better to comment on the segments and even more on the specific companies, which, as you know, I can't comment on.
Sure, right. But, a lot of the people listening are investors in some way, shape, or form. Some are large VC companies, but most of the people that are listening are solo people that buy maybe a biotech stock here or there. Without getting into the specifics of any one company, what are some tips and tricks that you can share with evaluating a company?
So I think if somebody is a casual investor buying a biotech stock here and there, I would recommend they not do that because it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of expertise. Some of the best investors have multiple PhDs and MDs out there looking at what is going to work versus not going to work. Now, if you want to gamble and place some bets based on the momentum, that's totally up to your choice. But there is no science to it. I think that is your judgment call, and you are placing a bet. But to me, what I like about this industry, wonderful focus on patients, huge unmet needs. Human biology is very complex, which means it will not be solved that easily. There is amazing science happening. We are learning about our human biology by the day, and we're learning a lot about it. Interest rates are hopefully going down now. The Fed has started to turn the interest rates down. And the unmet needs are huge. Right? So one can get excited about all the fundamentals here. The challenge is still the IPO market, which is often the exit for the private investments, has not revved up yet. Let's hope it does that at some point in the coming year. Interest rates are going down, but you and I both know, who knows if the 1970s were to happen, they could turn around as the inflation kicks in. Let's hope that is not the case. But those are the things that give me a pause. So overall industry, I get attracted to. I would say the specific companies is where the real magic is. But I choose to invest together with the real experts who really know their science. And I try not to make random biotech picks, to be honest.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good insight. Even just to pump the brakes a little bit is good advice. Switch gears here a little bit because one of the things I really respect about you is that you take a long range view on things, but also you take a long range view backwards and really understand history. I saw this video that you did where you were talking about your son who's fascinated by history, and you guys were talking about disruptive technologies and civilizations throughout history. And so with your forward looking lens now, what technologies, what things are right on the brink of being major disruptors in the pharma industry?
Yeah, so I think the fascinating part about history is that the GDP per capita, thanks to innovation, has increased dramatically over time. When the first railway engine came, people said, oh my goodness, the world is going to end to the existing jobs out there. And that only led to a transportation revolution. When you had internet come, when you had the search engine comes, when you had the mobile technology come. There have been so many big disruptors, and we're looking at one of them right now, which is AI. And in this industry, we've been talking about personalized medicine also. But to me, those are the obvious ones, right? People have been talking about for a long time. Everybody talks about AI in drug discovery, personalized medicine, and so on, which all are, in my mind, table stakes. You should be using them in the appropriate way. I get excited about the what and the how. On the how, I'm no expert to say which ones are going to work, given the expertise required is immense for each one of these areas. One can, on paper, only get excited about radiopharmaceuticals, biospecifics, new targets. GLP-1s, for example, which have transformed the world right now as we speak, are still not available in small molecule form. Are they going to be available in those forms? Are there going to be better targets out there? Cell therapies, gene therapies, microspheres, nanospheres, one can go on and on, right? So there are a lot of tools out there that our colleagues are discovering and implementing all around the place. But what I get most excited about is the problems we're trying to solve. Going after solid tumors, going after neuroscience. Alzheimer's, there's finally some hope out there, it seems. Let's hope it's real, but it is there. If you look at all the other neuroscience diseases, the rare diseases we're going after. So to me, I think it is what that excites me the most, how the tools are growing immensely, and there's some amazing people doing amazing stuff.
Yeah. And I know, and we're going to get to the punchline of this whole thing, but I know you like to look years, even decades. This episode is brought to you by K. Bassman International, the leader in pharma and biotech recruiting. When pharma executives need to make critical hires, they go to the experts at K. Bassman, pharma's one-source staffing solution. Visit kbic.com. Now back to the episode. When you brought up AI, even though it is sort of an obvious disruptor and we're all kind of seeing just the beginning of it, over the next 20 years, how do you see AI being a disruptor in drug development? Could it potentially lower the costs?
So I think, well, let's hope so. I think it's good for society if it does. And I think just not AI, but more broadly also. So let me take a broader look at it. AI will have a huge impact, in my mind, on the operations, because from discovery all the way to launch and then commercialization and the sales process and all of that, AI, I hope, will lead to meaningful efficiencies that help us as an industry bring better drugs to the patients faster. I have much more confidence on the operational side of AI and what it can do. Everybody is using AI for drug discovery. There's no biotech I talk to who is not using AI. It seems AI is more like Excel now. And I say, look, you should be using AI just like you use Excel. Yes, we are not at the same level yet, but in the next 20 years or so, there's no doubt and no reason why AI will not be the mainstream tool that everybody should be using. But that said, I think the bigger impact of AI in my mind would be risk management. I often share an example where, as I was working with a C-suite, they were all enthusiastic about a few drugs that they were about to get approval for. But when I went to the cafeteria and met with the team members 3 or 4 layers down, because I personally find to be most useful to not only spend time with the C-suite, but also 2 or 3 layers down. And what you find is that all of them pointed out the risk as to why it may fail. And guess what? Most of those drugs failed. So what I think AI would be most useful for, because if you look at the spend that I talked about, the $250 billion in R&D spend, most of that cost is the cost of failures. Only 10% of the INDs will ultimately become a drug. So the cost of failure is extremely high. And to use AI to figure out and gather the emotional and the social intelligence of the company, apart from the scientific and technical intelligence, and say, guys, based on this, I don't think this is going to work. That will be a very, very powerful tool that AI can provide over time. AI can also help you with safety. Once a drug goes out to the real world, you just don't know where things are. You don't know how the data is coming back. And how do you track that from the social media feeds, from everything? How do you make sense of all of that? I do think that the safety part could be pretty enhanced. And then the clinical trial design. We are still living in the world of double-blinded placebo-controlled trials. Is that the right model? How do you get the right patients? How do you enroll them faster? So I think on all of those fronts, and ultimately linked back to the capital utilization, Where should you deploy the capital? As you know, at times there's a successful launch, lots of money comes in, and people spend that on R&D. Maybe one day AI will help us think through, should we be spending the money or holding on to it till we have a better idea? Or maybe giving it back to people. So those are the wins that I see if I take my crystal ball of how AI will help beyond what you all have, everybody talks about, right? AI and discovery and so on. I get much more enthusiastic about some of these other things.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, so succinctly said, so intelligent. There's one thing that throwing a curveball at you. We talk about all these drug failures. Is there a way to utilize AI to find out of all those things that have failed, what could be successful maybe in something else? Like, I wonder if there's a way to crunch the data to see which drugs are on the shelves that we could actually apply to some other disease that we weren't thinking about initially. What do you think about that?
So lots of people are looking into it. They've been trying to do that, right? It is not a new concept. People have been trying it for the last 10, 20 years.
Okay.
Success has been modest. And going back to the point of history, when history says something has not worked for a long time, it might actually. Let's hope it does, because it's a sensible idea. But the success has been modest. So let's be optimistic on that, though.
Okay. So I always have these ideas, these little invention ideas like you. And I'm always like way late on them. So it sounds like another one of those ideas that I'm way late on. But again, one of the things I respect about you is how far into the future you're trying to look. And so you started this company called 2123IX. Tell us about that.
So you won't find anything on the web yet on this. We are still in the process of building it up. 2123IX is thinking 100 years ahead and planning for 100 years ahead. And 2123, we were founded last year, so we are the 1 year mark. So we have 99 more years to go. That is how we're thinking about life. And so we are really no rush. But we are focused on innovation. We are focused on inventions. Our theme is imagine, experiment, and build. And we are no rush. Imagine, experiment, and build. Build it carefully, slowly, systematically. The two problems we are going after. The first one is about applying quantitative tools. I go back to my polymer physics roots and my chemical engineering roots and applying Markovian and Bayesian models, along with the fundamental thinking I picked up over the last 30 years, to the financial markets. And our thesis there is that, look, we just don't know. We're not that smart enough. Most people are not that smart. They're all over the map, and the market's all over the map. So why even try to guess? And are there other models through which one can enhance the returns that one can get in the financial markets? And the simple math I do for people is that, look, if I took $1 million and I compound at 8% over the next 25 years, that number becomes around $6.85 million. Not bad.
Bad.
But if I take a 100-year look, that becomes $2.123 billion at 8%. So there's some like magic to the 2123 number beyond the year also that we have in mind. But now I say, look, 8%, there are multiple ways to do it. Michael, now, can you put your heads together and make 20 happen? What would it take? Now it's a leap, right? It is not easy to do. Many people have tried it. Some have been very successful. 99% have failed. Failure has never discouraged me. So that's a swing that we are taking. Now, I know 20% will not happen, but just to do the math for you, if you were to compound at 20%, instead of the $6.85 million in 25 years at 8%, that number now becomes close to $95.4 million. Difference between 6.8 and 95.4, that is massive. But now if you take a 100-year look, right, and I know that I'm going to throw out a crazy number at you, and I could not believe it when I did the math the first time. If you compound $1 million at 20% a year over the next 100 years, that becomes $82 trillion. And we don't have many trillionaires right now, right? So it is. So we know this is an impossible goal. But rather than solve $1 million problem or $1 billion problem, can we solve a $1 trillion problem? So that is the first swing that we're taking. So far, so good. But this is a case where you need to test out over time, and time is a long time. first year has worked out. Let's see where the next second year goes. So that's the homework we're doing, and those are the models that we're building. So that is the first problem we are trying to solve.
Fascinating. The second problem, let's talk about the second problem.
Yeah, so as you know, our industry is becoming more and more private. The number of public companies are only going down over time, and just not our industry, across the board. So much of the innovation now will be private, both from pre-seed and all the way to pre-IPO, in case people decide to go public. And massive amounts of capital will be allocated through VCs, through PEs, and through many other places. Now, if you look at the public markets, Microsoft, Google, Apple, you just name it, so many analysts write about them. Who covers the private markets? How do you get an understanding of what exactly is going on in terms of technology and science? Only what they're willing to share. Now, the public company is willing to share a lot, and we've been surprised the private company is also willing to share a lot. So we are trying to build a knowledge asset that focuses on understanding what are the disruptive technologies in play in the private markets. And the goal is to build a knowledge asset around that and then have an advisory on top, but very specific and very deep expertise around specific topics. And at times begin to convene them because we want to make sure the capital allocation in the private technologies is efficient to enable more frontier innovations. That's our goal, and that's what we're working towards. And again, that's a big swing. I have no idea where that's going to go. In fact, on both of these, I may come back to you in a year and say, Michael, it didn't work. And we're totally fine with that. We want to take some big swings and have a blast doing that. So those are the two companies we're trying to build over time.
Wow. So let me just look at the name of this. So you started in 2023, you're taking a 100-year view. That's why the company is 2123. What does the IX stand for?
Innovation, imagination, and then X is for experimentation and scale. So we're going to experiment, and if it works, then we scale it up. Otherwise, we don't. So our theme is imagine, experiment, and build.
That sounds fascinating. Well, we wish you success. We'll probably do some sort of follow-up on that. But I want to transition because the Pharmaverse podcast is a leadership podcast. And I'm sure with your many years of consulting, you interacted with so many great pharmaceutical leaders and then also some not so great. So what made the best leaders stand out above the rest?
So I think I'm going to say some of the usual stuff I'm sure you heard from the others, but let me go down the list. There's no doubt that they're inspiring people leaders. If you're not a good people leader, you can survive for a bit, but not for long. And you cannot rise through the ranks without being a good leader. They're amazing operators. They know how to operate. They know how to make sure the organization is working. They don't mind giving the tough feedback as they need to, but they ensure they meet the numbers. They are able to commit to the goals, and they ensure that it gets done. So they're amazing operators. They're good strategic thinkers. They're always curious about what else is going on. What can I learn from others? What can I learn from other industries? How can I constantly improve? What is the vision I'm working towards? They are willing to take some big swings at times. They are willing to be bold thinkers at times, but in a careful way. Not in a bold way I just described to you right now, but they are a bit more careful, but that's good. That's very good and healthy. But the most important things that in my mind differentiate, and I'm sure you've heard this multiple times, right? I think what differentiates the best people in my mind is they know where to focus. They know where their time is best spent. They're decisive. They know for decisions, what information do I need? What knowledge do I need? Who need to be in the room to make that decision? They don't let the organization just spin and not make a decision. They or at least have a path to making that decision. They discourage a culture of meetings. I personally think, especially as I've taken my next chapter here, in my mind, meetings are not the most efficient things to do. And we all spend so much time in meetings. They fight hard the culture of meetings. And the most important thing in my mind, the most important thing, they are high values. Because that is the only thing that stands the test of time. So those are the things that come to my mind in terms of what differentiates great leaders from others. And I'm sure, like Michael, this is not inconsistent with what you've been hearing, and you are the pro at this. So you know a lot more, and hopefully this is same as your checklist of things you look for.
It is, and you know, to put it into one person is makes them an exceptional leader. Especially the last part about meetings. That's something I've been giving a lot of thought to. And, you know, after spending 22 years at McKinsey, working your way up to managing partner, I want to ask a little bit about what advice you would give to an aspiring leader early in their career, because a lot of our listeners are aspiring leaders. What advice would you give to them?
I think my advice would be that Be humble, be hungry, don't mind being shameless and fearless. And I use the word often. Go for a swing. At most, you will fail. At most, you will fail. That's the worst case scenario. But you don't want to look back and say, I did not take a swing. So don't be afraid to be shameless and fearless. Be a servant leader. You are as good as the team around you. Make sure you are leading from the back when you need to and leading from the front when you need to. At times, you need to lead from the front. Crisis will happen. Crisis will come your way. How do you navigate the crisis becomes critical. In fact, crisis is what makes true leaders shine. So I often chase a crisis because that is where you go and solve problems. And everybody's aligned at that time. There is no time to waste. People want to make sure that the right things are being done, decisions are made fast. So crises are an important opportunity. And I'm not saying that's an opportunity, but when you face a crisis, and every good leader will face a crisis, that's an important moment to shine. Double down at that time. So those are the few that come to my mind as to how one can differentiate and how one can excel over time.
Beautiful advice. One last question. Some of the people that I talk to have asked me, how do I get into a big consulting firm, and should I make a career in a consulting firm? What are some of the benefits of a career as a consultant?
So I think one has to think through at what stage do you want to enter. I think most of the consulting firms have a pretty clear path as they graduate people from early on, and they tap into them as they just graduate and they work with them. I came in as experienced hire, and the consulting firms are not as savvy and experienced in handling experienced hires. I think they're getting much better. McKinsey was getting much better over time. But there are others who are getting much better also. But that said, the best entry point is when you graduate from school. I think the reason why you should not mind doing it for a few years, maybe not for 22 years, right? But there's value in doing it for a few years because you get exposed to some amazing people. Amazing people. You work on the toughest problems. You don't work on ordinary problems. You work on the toughest problems. The breadth of experiences that you get is phenomenal. Your problem-solving skills go up to the next level because now you need to figure out how to prioritize and focus and do it rapidly. Your pace and metabolic rate goes up, right? Because you are delivering impact at a different pace. I can go on and on. So there are a lot of pros of being a consultant, but choose the right time to be a consultant. And don't be a consultant forever also. And that's why I chose to jump. I chose to jump and do something different. But I think it's like people's choice. I mean, there are some people who just love it, want to keep doing it forever, and that's totally fine. They're amazing at it. The bigger issue is how many consultants does the world need? So I think at some point the industry going to think through more broadly what is the right mix of consultants versus non-consultants. And I think that jury will be out, my guess, next 5-10 years as to what is the right balance.
Unfortunately, Nav, that is all the time we have for this episode, but we're leaving with a much better view of the pharma industry. We're going to keep a close eye out for the 2023 IX website to launch. Keep us posted on when that does. We'd like to see what you're up to. But for all in the Pharmaverse, I just want to say thank you. But sadly, we have to say goodbye. But we really appreciate you joining us here on the Pharmaverse.
Thank you, Michael. It was a real pleasure to chat with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Pharmaverse podcast. Make sure you subscribe below so you don't miss any leadership insights. Like and comment. I would love to hear from you. We'll see you on the next episode of Pharmaverse.